Mental health. What does it mean to have good psychological hygiene? What does it mean for your mind and your thought processes to be clean and clear and to feel good and to feel healthy in your mind? Are you curious? Well, you're in luck because we're going to talk about that right now. What's up, guys? This is your host Payman Satari. Welcome back to the Language of Truth. Today we're going to be talking about mental health. Now, this is a subject that was not always talked about very publicly up until kind of modern times. It was kind of thought that either you were sane or you were insane. If you had mental health issues or mental health problems, it was a pretty big stigma, at least here in the West. At the very least, publicly or around friends or in social situations, it was not something that you wanted to talk about. Mental health problems were usually associated with people that had something fundamentally wrong with them. Now in modern day society, we realize that mental health is something that everybody has to deal with. This isn't just for individuals who have some sort of issue going on. In addition to our physiological functioning and all of the processes that we can measure with our instruments and biologically, there's also a lot going on in the mind. So it's usually pretty clear what we have to do to take care of our bodies. You know, exercise, eating well, diet. These are questions that are pretty mainstream at this point, or conversation topics that we know are important to talk about if we hope to have a good sort of physiological, physical experience. But it's not always as clear what it means to take care of our minds. If you think of it as kind of like a garden, it's like, okay, well, I understand how to take care of those plants, but what about these ones? What do I have to do exactly? What are the steps that I need to take in order to make sure that this garden is growing clean and healthy and strong? So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at this question of mental health. We're going to look at this question of this psychological space that lives alongside our physiological one. And what are some of the steps that we can take to ensure that that garden is growing healthy and strong? So let's get into it. So one of the first tips that I have has to do with observer meditation. So you can go back to a previous episode to learn a little bit more about what this is. I'm not going to go as much into the specifics of the nature of this type of meditation. You can go back and watch that other episode if you want to check that out. But I want to talk a little bit more about how observer meditation specifically relates to better mental health and how it achieves such a thing. I'm going to pause really fast and say that any kind of mantra or any kind of phrase or words that I might give you or offer to you to use in your own subjective environment to help to achieve results, I want to emphasize and make it very, very clear that it's important that you focus in on the meaning of the words that you're using rather than simply reciting the words. If you're just reciting a mantra and just saying words without considering, or let's say putting yourself emotionally in the space of the meaning of what you're saying, well, you're not really creating that experience for yourself. It becomes very mechanical that way. It's like an actor who, let's say, would act without emotion. The structure might be there, but the content isn't. If you want a mantra to be effective, and this is kind of an aside here, but probably an important one, and especially for the discussion that we're about to have, it's important that your emotional self is present in those words and that you're focusing in on what they really mean as you say them. And in that way, you're going to be achieving a much better material effect in the process of reciting that mantra. So one of the mantras that I practice in, let's say, tending to my mental health, to my mental garden, my psychological space, I'll say to myself, I am not my mind. My mind is a part of me. I am not my thoughts. My thoughts are a part of me. What this is saying basically is that I am not equal to my mind. My identity is not confined by my thoughts, not confined by my mental or psychological faculties. And the reason that I bring this up is because part of the issue that many of us have, especially those of us who are not well versed in looking within, looking at our thoughts, observing all these relationships and trying to understand these things, we become so identified with our thoughts, we think that we are equal to them. And so by being inside of our thoughts and inside of our minds, we then can't interact or deal with it in a way that is independent, in a way that is removed enough from it to interact with it freely. When you're inside of something, you can't see it obviously from the outside anymore, and that's problematic. Think, for example, about a romantic relationship that you've been in, that suddenly after, let's say, 2 months of being outside of that relationship and not being in it anymore and looking back on it, you have a lot of clarity because of the distance. And we want to achieve the same effect to some degree with the mind by reminding ourselves, by tuning into the fact that we can listen to and be aware of our thoughts from a space that is removed from it to some degree. So what I'm going to say is that in the vast majority of the psychological, philosophical, metaphysical, and scientific literature that I've read, either people think that the mind is produced by the body and produced by all the chemical reactions and interactions that we have in our physical body, or people believe that consciousness is equal to mind. That when we say mind, we're talking about the observer, the subject. I don't agree with this point of view, and it's something that I'm going to go into in a later video. We don't have space to discuss it here, but suffice it to say that I believe that consciousness is more connected to being than it is to thinking. Very briefly, and this is something we're going to talk about way later, but there are 4 particular areas that I think of when I'm thinking about the whole human consciousness. One is doing, which is just action, movement, creation. One is feeling, which is sentience, which is sensory, which is emotional. One is thinking, which is mental, psychological, and deals with thought. And the final one, which is the one I'm trying to get to here to get across the nature of it, is being. And I think of being as something fundamentally, or I should say diametrically opposed, that it lives on the opposite side of the polarity to doing. And it's important to express it that way because I'm not saying that they're against each other. I'm not saying that they're opposites in the sense of being at war with each other and one is trying to gain supremacy. Think of it more in terms of a spectrum, that there are poles in the spectrum, that in reality the whole spectrum is connected as one thing. But you can be leaning or shifting more to one side or the other. You can either be in movement, in action, and in production, or you can be in this sort of neutral zero state where you're not really doing anything at all. You're simply present. You're simply existing. Observer meditation, in my mind and in my analysis, has presence and existence and this thing we call being at the heart of it. Being is at the heart of observer meditation, and presence is at the heart of it. The issue is that if we believe ourselves to be identified or identical with what we're thinking, you can't really be present with it anymore because you're inside of it. Observer meditation is particularly helpful with mental health because we're so often trapped in the mind. I mean, virtually everybody who has a somewhat busy life knows that at the end of the day, it can be really, really difficult to deal with your mind. I know that a lot of people have trouble sleeping at night. They have trouble relaxing because as soon as they stop, so to speak, and they're not engaged with anything, they're not looking at their phone, they're not watching a TV show, the mind is just going like a freight train that will not stop. And especially if your mind has a negative tinge to it and you have a lot of negative thoughts, you're thinking about negative potentials or negative outcomes, it can cause you so much anxiety, it can really scare the crap out of you, and it can make it difficult to get comfortable and to relax. So observer meditation, what it's doing basically is creating enough distance between you and your mind and you and your thoughts that you can then come back and interact with them in a way that has sufficient independence that you can grow aware and absorb the information that you need to come back and change your thoughts in intentional ways. So observer meditation is helpful for the creation of that distance and for the creation of awareness of these inner processes. The second thing I want to mention, and again, these two are sometimes equated with each other, is mindfulness. Mindfulness and meditation are not exactly the same thing. And again, I don't want to get into a war of words and be like, oh, no, that's mindfulness is meditation and blah, blah. That's fine. Define it however you want. In the context of this conversation, though, mindfulness is not the same thing as meditation in the way that I want to express it to you right now. Mindfulness, for me, has to do with presence with anything. In reality, mindfulness has to do with being present with what you can witness. Observer meditation for me is primarily internal. It primarily has to do with an observation of internal processes and internal functioning. Mindfulness for me has more to do with presence in a more let's say in a broader way. I could be sitting and having a conversation with somebody and not be paying attention to them because, again, maybe I'm thinking about 7 different things, or my emotions might be all over the place, or I'm thinking about what I want to do tomorrow, or maybe even physically I'm uncomfortable. Mindfulness for me has to do with being present with whatever it is that I'm doing. So if I'm cooking dinner, for example, I want to be smelling the spices that I'm using. When I cut open a vegetable, I want to take it in. I want to feel, the things that I'm working with. In a way, you could say mindfulness is in some ways connected to our senses and being aware of our sensory experience and the sensory data that we're taking in from moment to moment, rather than being in the intellect, let's say, or in the mental or psychological space. And the reason that this helps with mental health is because it sort of deprives the mind of excess attention. We can be inside of the mind thinking about all kinds of things unconsciously. We don't realize that we're doing it. We don't realize that the mind has so much of our energy and so much of our attention. And so one of the metaphysical principles that we'll talk about in a later episode is that attention equals energy, basically. That whatever receives your attention is at the same time receiving energy. And what this leads to ultimately is a train that will not stop at the end of the day because it has so much energy. Think of it like this. Every thought that you pay attention to, whether it's conscious or unconscious, that's receiving your energy, is like throwing coal in the engine room into the engine of the train. So when you're constantly throwing coal into the train, well, it's no wonder that by the end of the day, that when you cut the engine, the train is still going really, really fast because it has so much inertia and so much momentum. So mindfulness is useful in that when we can give the point of our awareness and the point of our attention to other things that are not mental or not psychological, we're essentially robbing the mind of excess energy by robbing the mind of excess attention. So for example, let's say you're out in nature with some friends or something. Instead of being super engaged in just the conversation, take a moment to close your eyes, to smell the air, to feel the air, to open your eyes and look at whatever vista is in front of you. You could be in your front lawn, you could even be in your bedroom, and focus your attention less on your thoughts and more on your senses. So you have 5 senses, 5 universally agreed upon senses: your sense of touch, your sense of smell, your sense of sight, your sense of hearing, and your sense of taste. So if you're eating, pay attention to what you're tasting. See how it feels. Just be present with it. If you're outside, feel the air. Try to create positive experiences through your senses and to keep your awareness and your attention on your sensory experience and not so much in your intellect or in your thinking or mental faculty. This is an extraordinarily helpful exercise in, again, neutralizing some of that excess energy that the mind has so that it's not a runaway train, so that train isn't basically, moving at 100,000 miles per hour by the end of the day. And gradually, by slowly shifting more and more of your attention to sensory experiences rather than purely intellectual ones, the train will slow down and it will be easier and easier to be in that mental space and to be aware of everything that's going on in that mental space, because it's not moving faster than you can absorb, faster than you can take in and be aware, basically. So the third one is exercise. And I know this has been talked about a million times in a million different areas, and I don't want to rehash just stuff that you already know. I want to maybe clue into certain insights that might be less talked about. And one of them has to do with the fact that if you're not used to exercise, if it's not something that is very appealing to you, you gotta start really small. You gotta start in small, manageable chunks. And there's a reason that this is important for your mental health. The mind and our breathing are fundamentally connected. I personally used to smoke cigarettes for a lot, way more than I should have, and that messed up my breathing really bad. And when I first started exercising with more rigor and with more consistency, it had nothing to do with being like a buff dude who looks good, to others. It had to do with my lungs. It had to do with my breathing, specifically the air that's reaching my brain. Because your breathing and your mind, your breathing and your thinking have a fundamental connection. And one of the easiest ways to improve your respiration and to improve your breathing and the circulation of the air through your blood is through exercise. Whatever it is that you need to do to start getting your blood moving is going to help you in this respect. So if you're not used to exercise, don't despair. It is fine. Start with what is manageable to you. Start with something small and manageable, and I promise you it's going to make you feel good, even if it's something small. Even military exercise, people that haven't done it before, they suggest to start in the first week with stretching. They're not saying, start out gung-ho and move, as fast as you can. That doesn't lead to the best results in the long run. What leads to the best results in the long run is to know your own body, to know your own limits, and to work with that. So that's the first thing that I want to say about exercise. This is accessible for everybody, I promise. You just got to take it in the chunks that work for you. And it will make a big difference in your mental health, particularly because of the oxygen that your brain will be receiving through the circulation of your blood from the movement that you're doing and through a little bit of the rigor and push that you're exercising when doing a little bit of physical movement and physical motion. I'm going to also suggest in this age of COVID to take off your mask sometimes. I'm not saying to do it all the time. I'm not saying to be, unsafe. I'm just saying that your body was meant to breathe air. If you're up in the mountains, if you're on a hike and there's no one around you, take your mask off and take deep, deep breaths. Breathe that air and drink it into your body as deeply as you can. Take it to the core of your lungs, take it up to your brain, and breathe as deeply as you can. And the last thing that I want to say on the exercise front is that while any kind of exercise is helpful for this, particularly yoga and cardio are especially helpful for mental health. And the reason for that, and we'll start with yoga, is because breathing and thinking are connected. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in the next point, that when you're breathing air and you're making your breathing consistent, it can really, really help you to calm down the mind and to reach a more centered psychological space. So yoga, because you're stretching, you're moving slowly, and you're breathing while you're doing it, it's particularly helpful for your mental health. The second one is cardio, and the reason that cardio is helpful is because, again, you're pushing your breathing a lot more, and because you're circulating your blood and your blood carries oxygen. So carrying that oxygen to your body, all around your body, is very, very helpful. So with exercise, just keep it really simple, keep it in manageable chunks, and focus on your breath. Focus on your breathing, focus on your respiration more than you're focusing on physical results, and that will help you. Even to this day, when I go for a run or something, and I used to hate running, but when I go for a run now, I'm focused on my lungs and on my breathing because that's the effect that I'm looking for, because I want to keep myself grounded, because I want my breathing to be consistent. So if you do that, you're going to get the physical results anyway. You're going to be happy about the fact that you look better and that you feel better and that your skin's clearer and all of that. But ultimately, you're focusing on the fact that you want to improve your inner health first. And your outer health will improve because it's correlated, but depending on what you're focused on, that's where you're going to achieve the most results. So focus more on your inner health, focus more on your inner experience than necessarily your outer presentation. And I think it will be easier to think about exercise in a more approachable way because you'll take it in manageable chunks instead of thinking about that outward physical result that you're looking for, which can sometimes seem like it's way too far in the future. So number 4 on this list is breathing. And I know that we just talked about it extensively, but there's just a couple of quick points I want to make about this. It'll be later in this series that we start talking more about the correlations between physical and conscious processes, but I'm just going to say up front here that air, the element of air, and the faculty of thinking or the mind or psychology are fundamentally correlated. So if your breathing is irregular, your thinking will be irregular. These are parallels to each other. So making your breathing deep, steady, and consistent will have a correlation to making your thoughts deep, steady, and consistent. There are 1,000 other videos on the internet that will teach you breathing exercises that will do a much better job than I will. But one thing that I want to mention that I don't hear that often is noticing when your breathing is inconsistent. Again, this has to do with that inner awareness. It has to do with being awake and aware to what's going on inside of you. But if you pay attention, you'll notice that there are moments in your life, especially when you get nervous, when you hold your breath. And you're holding your breath without realizing it, without being conscious of it, because in that moment, your consciousness may be attuned to what it is that's freaking you out. But when you hold your breath like that, you're also arresting your mental faculty. So when you feel panicked, when you feel overwhelmed, it is incredibly important to take a moment to close your eyes and to breathe in deep. And I'm going to say, slow down your breathing. Slow it down as much as you can. Because in those moments, you may notice that your breath is ragged or that it's irregular or it's too fast. So by paying attention to that velocity, you can kind of roll that back and intentionally, on purpose, make it steady, make it consistent, and make it slow and deep as much as you can. So one thing I want to say about all these different areas that I've mentioned so far is that they have one thing in common. They all have to do with slowing down. Slowing down basically means decreasing your velocity, right? Decreasing your activity. Again, going back to our earlier analogy, this would be spending a little bit more time on the being polarity and a little bit less on the doing polarity. The problem with this is that we live in a society that highly values doing, creation, production, and speed. If you look at modern day society, if you look at our priorities, regardless of what we might be saying out loud, ideologically or philosophically, our actions reveal, when you look at the way that society functions, that our priorities are in production, our priorities are in creation. If I pulled 2 all-nighters this weekend and then went to work and said, oh man, I worked so hard this weekend, I didn't even sleep, all I did was work. People are like, yeah, good job, like you're amazing, what a hard worker, not acknowledging the fact that that lack of rest is a lack of health. That this isn't something to be praising, that this is an unhealthy activity to be pushing your body past its limits, and will lead to psychological damage and to emotional damage in the long run because of a lack of awareness. Speed leads to awareness of your objectives. This is a principle we'll talk about in later episodes, but suffice it to say that the faster you move, the more aware you become of where you are going. Awareness of your ultimate destination or objective becomes very, very clear when you move quickly. When you move slowly, your attention and awareness becomes to not where you're going, but where you are. And this is why slowing down is so important. Because in a society that highly values objectives and highly values production, highly values creation, we encourage people to be aware of their objectives. But if you're always moving fast and always aware of where it is that you're going, you may not be very aware of what it is that you're feeling or what it is that's going on around you. You may be completely unconscious to the realities that are occurring within your environment and within your life in the moment because you're so focused on what it is that you want to do and where it is that you want to go. And I don't think I need to elaborate on why that's problematic. You're lacking awareness to what is actually happening because you're so focused on where it is that you're going and what it is that you want to achieve. So slowing down becomes important, and every one of these other exercises that I've given you is leading to a reduction in the velocity with which you are living so that you can grow more aware of everything that's happening around you and everything that's happening inside of you. And to reiterate, this is not about only going slowly and never speeding up. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with speed, anything wrong with production or activity. It's simply that within this polarity, within these two sides, between moving fast and moving slow, between being aware of our objectives and being aware of what's happening around us, we happen to be more biased towards this side, which makes this one more important to emphasize and exercise so that we might reach a sort of equilibrium state somewhere in the middle where we can both speed up and slow down as is appropriate for our individual circumstances. The last thing that I'll say about slowing down is that I know that it can be daunting to slow down because the mind gets louder. I think this is why we like to keep ourselves chronically distracted, because there's so many uncomfortable things happening internally, both emotionally and psychologically, that when we slow down and reduce the volume of the stuff that's happening externally, all that hurt, all that discomfort, all that stuff that we're not paying attention to becomes more and more visible, and that can be daunting. So what I'm going to suggest is that you use these exercises, particularly the observer meditation and the mindfulness, to make the process of dealing with this inner space more manageable when you slow down, so that you don't have to be afraid of slowing down. You don't have to be afraid of the silence anymore. I know that the silence can be very uncomfortable for most of us, that especially those of us who are used to constant activity. If you live in a city, even more so, because you're probably even used to constant sound and some sort of constant engagement. And so when things slow down, it can be very uncomfortable because the volume essentially is increasing in your inner life, and everything that you've sort of shoved under the bed that you're not paying attention to suddenly becomes visible, and that can be scary. So just know that you don't have to be scared, that there are tools that you can use to deal with these things intelligently that will lead to the results that you're looking for. Particularly practice the observer meditation and practice mindfulness to neutralize some of that excess energy that you have in your inner space so that you can slow down comfortably and without fear, and have more of an equilibrium between your inner and outer elements and kind of get relaxed and get comfortable within yourself. So there's probably 1,000 other things that I could talk about in this episode. There's so many methods of dealing with our psychological space that are cool and effective. And I want you to help by commenting below the ones that you've come up with, the ones that you use that are effective for you. Let's turn this comment section into a resource for other people who are coming here to help themselves. This is an area of life and reality where we really, really need help. When it comes to the physical body, we have studied it extensively. Talk to any doctor and how long it takes to get through medical school, and they will tell you the extent of the knowledge that we've gained about the physical body. But when it comes to mental health and tending to this part of the garden, so to speak, we're not as aware. It's finally becoming a little bit less stigmatized. We're opening up to talking about it more. We're opening up to finding the methods that are effective in neutralizing the discomfort that we have in this region of our lives. I'm excited to see what you guys have to say about this and what's worked for you, and to use some of your methods for myself in my own life so I can have an even happier and better experience. So please, please, please do that. Definitely check out the other episode, 3 types of meditation and the nature of introspection. There are a couple exercises in there that deal with converting some of the negative psychological energy into positive psychological energy through the creation of certain imagery intentionally that can help to shift some of the energy in the mind. Definitely check that episode out too. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Definitely comment down below all your favorite exercises, anything else you want to say. Like this video if you like this video, and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss anything. Hit that bell icon so you get notified when there's new videos. And I'll probably record one more non-system video after this, and then we'll get back to our discussion in the History of Truth series. So thanks again for watching. This is Payman Sataya with The Language of Truth, and I'll talk to you again next time.